Good evening. I'm actually a brand and marketing strategist at Redwood Custom Communications. I was pulled into this because Ruth and I go way back. And this actually came out of a conversation, I guess about a year and a half ago, right? Ruth, and she said, well, how do you fund this? How do we do? We've talked about this on multiple ways, multiple occasions. And I said, let's look at the Grameen Bank and see if there's a possible solution there. And I think that was the start of the conversation that brought us here tonight. So I'm Monforte's minister without portfolio. I open my big mouth once too often, and here I am. By now, I think you've grasped that there's more than just cheese going on. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? We're dedicated to the proposition that if Barack Obama can deploy passionate volunteerism, an extraordinary online fundraising prowess, and a simple positive truth via blog and Facebook and Twitter, and win the White House, and be named the U.S. Marketers of the Year, then we ought to be able to help run Ruth and her cheeses as Renaissance Monforte candidate. So here we are. Everyone here is a volunteer. Absolutely all of us. And we're here because we can see ever less dimly on the horizon through the lens of Monforte a new kind of politics of food in this province. It's getting closer. You can feel it in the farmers' markets and at the LCBO and the chef's schools and the dinner table itself, which is where it matters most. Renaissance 2010 is here to relaunch Monforte, yes, absolutely. But we're here equally so to revive and amplify a conversation about the future of food here in Ontario. Make no mistake, this isn't a conversation about agricultural policy. That's top-down. We're bottom-up. We want to change the politics of food in Ontario for one simple, almost all too obvious a reason. Food culture in Ontario, the heritage, the traditional arts and crafts and science that underpins Ontario's abundance, from native seed stocks to heritage pork breeds to handmade cheese itself, has almost disappeared. Canada is a young country with all that comes with that extraordinary blessing. But our youth also means that our culture, while vibrant, is sometimes thin on the ground. That's particularly true of food. As you all know, entire fruit-growing industries in Ontario either are imperiled or extinct while we ship fruit from California and Chile and factory farm, because that's what our forefathers thought was progress. To use a phrase from my friend Michael Hayes' world, there was no true cost accounting of the real all-in costs of living as we have unsustainably for so long. This is a species of madness because oil won't stay at $40 a barrel for long. Try $200. That's what The Economist predicted last week for 2012. And that's not a carbon footprint issue. That's a food supply issue. And that's just one factor in the politics of food equation. A century ago, traditional cheese making was a local affair. There were dozens of cheese factories within 100 miles of Toronto producing manifold varieties of cheeses, some of them medieval recipes, brought here from France and England and Germany, from all over Europe. Back then, no one gave much thought to the notions of sustainability or appropriate land use. For one thing, the province's agricultural landmass had been virgin forest barely 75 years before. But today, that scale of diversity, and thus economic security and ecological stability and labor market fluidity, is long gone. When Ruth started Monforte, I was her second recruit. I drove the red Mazda pickup with one bald tire, chatted up the chefs and cheesemongers, did the deliveries, winkled stories about Monforte into Toronto life and the Star, and generally exhausted myself trying to keep up with Ms. Klassen. Ruth is, you must understand, a force of nature. And I went to the Mennonite farms and watched Ruth negotiate, often hilariously, with the taciturn shepherds who, inch by inch, were won over by the stroppy Stratford woman in the big plastic boots. Me, I learned how refrigeration works when there's no hydro. You cut ice from the pond and stack it in sawdust in an old air sea container where it keeps for months. I learned how sheep love to be milked by hand and produce better quality milk that way. I learned that chefs love the weight of Ruth's cheeses just holding them in the palm of their hands. And I did demo after demo, hundreds of them, learning what cheese lovers love about Monforte. And I learned about Ruth herself, a PhD of an education in integrity and passion. All that to say, that's why I'm here tonight, to speak my particle of truth about Monforte. It's all true, you know. Ruth has doubled sales every year. It's all about word of mouth and passion and scrupulous attention to quality, plus that ineffable, unquantifiable additional ingredient, Ruth herself. So that's our marketing and media plan: Obama and cheese and Ruth. And we have a little catchphrase we like to stir up a little talk around town: flock you. All in all, we think it'll work. We think we can edge the conversation about food, sustainability, and microproduction into a better place in our home and native land. Thanks so much for coming and hearing our story. And type fast, folks, Ruth. Type fast, folks. Ruth needs a new dairy. Live and be well.